Talking about this ongoing scandal. Now, this is a long-running scandal involving this company, Theranos. They are a privately held health technology company. They've been involved in this scandal for a long time. They made a number of false claims over their proprietary devices that they had made. They devised these, they said, revolutionary blood tests using very small amounts of blood. The technology was completely uh, did not work. The technology that they were using, there were a number of patients that were misdiagnosed by going through this company. They're being charged by for fraud. They have connections to a lot of high-profile individuals. They had some major donors. Rupert Murdoch donated over $100 million. Here is the founder of Theranos, Elizabeth Holmes, who dropped out of Stanford University at 19 to found this company. Here she is pictured with Bill Clinton, another person who backed Theranos. I'm joined in this discussion. We'll talk about this. I want to talk about it with Holly Seeliger of the Zoon Politikon. Am I pronouncing that right? She's another YouTuber here. Holly, thanks for joining. I'd like you to
Hey,
check
thanks,
out
Chris.
her channel. Yeah, thank you. I have her channel name right up here if you want to search yourself. And yeah, just expand on this. I mean, tell me what you know about Theranos. You did a video on it. You can see here yesterday. You talked about Theranos a little bit.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested and intrigued. I mean, Elizabeth Holmes, she's really been promoted over the past, 15 years as a wonder child of Silicon Valley. She went to Stanford. She was doing some interesting medical research in college, and basically she was promoted as like this self-made billionaire. She managed to find a bunch of funders, big funders, and to raise a lot of money to start up this blood testing service that Theranos, which they claimed would revolutionize the blood testing services. She was selling it to Walgreens, etc. And she originally raised over $9 billion through venture capitalists. And now she's being charged with wire fraud. She and her partner, and it looks like there's going to be a Hollywood movie made about her. Kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think that is definite. Well, there's a lot of like suspicious stuff about this company. Now, one of the people that first exposed what was going on at Theranos was John Carreyrou of the Wall Street Journal. He wrote a book, Bad Blood, that was recently released because we have some new developments in the court case that have happened recently, and with the release of this book, this has popped up in the news again. So Jennifer Lawrence is supposed to be playing Elizabeth Holmes, who's the founder of this company. I am seeing this story kind of spun a little bit, sort of twisted. I think possibly, I think, to cover for some of these investors. I really wonder what was really going on at this company and if they were ever genuinely trying to set up these blood tests for early testing, as they said, or if this company could have been a front for something else. You had a lot of
Mm-hmm.
major investors that you wouldn't think would be so naive to fall for this company. She, Elizabeth Holmes, was a 19-year-old college dropout at the time, and she got all these investors. The Walton family, very wealthy family, invested over $150 million. Rupert Murdoch was a major investor, over $120 million. Henry Kissinger was a major investor. Again, you would think that these are not naive people. Now, one of the things that John Carreyrou points out, again, I think he does a lot of good work, but the one criticism that I would have is that I think that he is sort of absolving the role that some of these investors had, not doing their due diligence on this story at all. It's remarkable that they were all duped by this 19-year-old. I definitely think that that's a pretty remarkable. Uh, I guess if maybe we can just look at her. One of the other first major investors was Ramesh Sunny Balwani, which was For a time, Elizabeth Holmes, the founder of this company's boyfriend, quite a bit older, over 20 years her senior. So I think that they first met apparently at Beijing, and there was a story in Fortune. And this, again, was disturbing to me, just to set up what I think might be going on with these other investors. Again, I think the role that they played in this whole company, I think there could be something else going on. And these investors are acting as victims. The media, I think, trying to portray them as victims. And I expect this film that's supposed to come out with Jennifer Lawrence will kind of push the same narrative when I think maybe they were never really genuinely trying to help patients as they claimed, and it was a failed project or a failed investment, like many of these people are claiming. If you look at some of the statements from Balwani, I just want to read one passage from this Fortune article. I'll go back to you, Holly, and ask what you think about this. But so this was a quote, again, from Ramesh Sunny Balwani, who was for a time the boyfriend of Elizabeth Holmes, the founder of this company. Fortune article on him at the time saying, faulting the former lab director without also faulting the COO who had permitted the lab to descend to such levels was not plausible. CMS signaled its rejection of the company's stance. It's a 45-page letter on March 18th threatening to ban Holmes and Balwani. Theranos had replied to the letter. It is not known when CMS will decide, they say at the time, when final action will take place. They go on, they say the departure of Balwani is clearly the most striking, surprising, and potentially weighty part of Thursday's news, at least from the likely perspective of CMS. Some of the most disturbing parts of the journal's first story about Theranos last October concerned email conversations between Balwani and a former lab employee, which the former employee believed showed problems with the accuracy of Theranos's proprietary technologies and possible impropriety in the way that Theranos was handling proficiency tests it was required to perform to keep its regulatory license. The company responded at the time that both the employee and the journal misunderstood the pertinent science and rules, and that regulators were kept fully apprised of how Theranos was handling the proficiency tests. He says in his own conversations with former Theranos lab employees after the journal story broke, several bridled having had to answer to Balwani, who they stressed had no background in lab science. This is another thing that you would think would have been a red flag. I'll just add for these other investors that almost nobody on the board of Theranos, or none of these major investors, had any sort of medical or science background. They were all bankers. This should have raised red flags for, again, these people like Murdoch, Kissinger, later the Clintons. You would think that they would do some more due diligence, seeing that nobody with a science or medicine background was involved. You had Balwani, who was described as the enforcer, intimidating his own lab employees. He didn't have a background in medicine. There was one specific quote that I wanted to pull. They talk about when Balwani first met Holmes in Beijing. It says after Holmes had been admitted to Stanford as an undergraduate, where she would study chemical engineering while he was already in the middle of his career, having launched and sold an early business-to-business cloud services company at Commerce One, a pioneering e-commerce company. So she was in high school at the time, and he was already had founded, I think, his third company, Balwani. Balwani got involved with this company. He'd worked at Microsoft. They'd kept in touch afterward. Balwani was studying machine learning at Stanford. You see that machine learning is a branch of artificial intelligence that involves pattern recognition. So this is the key thing that I wanted to point out. So Balwani, the boyfriend of this original founder, much older, but had founded his third company at the time. He was studying machine learning. Machine learning, this branch of artificial intelligence, and involves pattern recognition, massively parallel computing, and processing enormous data sets. This was the quote that he gave on how he came to be interested in joining this organization. He said, quote, "When I saw what they were doing at Theranos, I thought this will be a really good application for machine learning because we are going to generate a lot of data. and we'll be able to do some interesting work around that. That will be very beneficial to the healthcare system. Holly, tell me that that does not sound disturbing with what came out later about this company, all the fraud that they were engaged in, knowing what else these sorts of investors, the Clintons and others, are, the other sorts of projects that they're generally engaged in. And I think that you did a video, we just talked about it before we went live briefly on, there's a lot of suspicion about, it reminds me in some way of these ancestry companies that are popping up and asking, oh, send in your DNA. And that actually was Elizabeth's ultimate vision, the technology that she wanted to develop down the line. It sounded like was something like that, where you would basically do your own blood test and you're uploading it from home. You're basically constantly uploading your blood online. And that's what, attracted Balwani to this organization. That's a little disturbing to me.
Yeah, so I guess part of Elizabeth's background was that she was working originally on the SARS disease research, which was an Asian flu virus that she was working on at Stanford. And then she had this idea for, yes, a wearable device that people could basically have on them at all times that would monitor their blood, check their cholesterol levels, etc., and it would go back into computing systems. And as Chris brought up, I've done some videos about the blood testing or genetic testing companies, 23andMe and others, who have been giving out their data to police, etc. Also, companies whose blood and DNA testing services have been hacked. And I found that Elizabeth Holmes's father had been appointed by George Bush Sr. to be the assistant administrator of the EPA at one point. So she was marketed as like this, rags to riches young woman. Meanwhile, both of her family members are working within the U.S. government.
That's funny. I saw one interview with her from, I think, Vanity Fair, and she wouldn't go into detail about who her original investors were, and she described it like, well, my parents, they went into their retirement, they dipped into their retirement fund, basically, was how she to launch this big pharma company. Yeah, she got all these other investors later, but she acted as if it was just, my parents gave some of their retirement money.
According to the New Yorker, also, Theranos raised more than $400 million from numerous investors, including the founder of Oracle, Larry Ellison. And if our audience knows anything about Oracle, it's a cloud computing service, part of the Oracle Corporation, right, that provides servers, storage, network, and massive data centers.
Yeah, so I mean that totally could tie into that sort. I think that it would definitely make me think that there could be some kind of data collection. And well, they were open about it. They said it openly, but I wonder if that was the main goal, even more so than the technology that they developed, that they weren't even trying to help people. And then there's all this money that just went missing. A lot of these, hundreds of millions of dollars that were invested by these various sources. They say some of it had gone back into legal fees. A lot of it went into this technology that didn't end up working. And I thought it was interesting too that there were several versions of this technology that they developed. So there was the version that I guess was the main one that they were developing, that was basically what you described, which sounds similar to what I guess diabetics use to test themselves, but it tests all diseases, I guess, was supposed to be the plan. But originally, right out of college, Elizabeth Holmes was proposing something similar, but basically a device that you would wear. It sounds like it had some kind of micro needles that it would constantly test your blood and at the same time inject the appropriate drug. And I think that's where Theranos, the name, was supposed to come from. It's therapy and diagnosis in one word. It was supposed to be both. I mean, that idea isn't really possible. I mean, that's a science fiction type of idea. But again, that's a 19-year-old college dropout having a complete science fiction idea, duped all of these billionaire investors somehow. And again, Wall Street Journal, I think they've done some great reporting on this. But if I did have one criticism, it's just I don't know that they're delving quite enough into exactly what these investors might have or might have known at the time. I don't know if it's also worth mentioning that they moved their organization to Arizona. They worked in Arizona because I guess there's less regulations there. That was one reason than California, where they had originally set up. That's also a red flag. I mean, that's a red flag to me.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that are immediate? I mean, I took some other notes about again from. I would like to go back and look at this whole that whole everything that he has to say in Bad Blood, which is the book that this movie's supposed to be based off of. These documents, I mean, we could go through. This is just about 15-page document that fully summarizes exactly what the charges are against both Holmes and Balwani as well. This was released on June 2018, so we can look at that. You had a couple other articles. Was there anything that you wanted to touch on first, or do you want to look at that, Holly?
Well, I just think it's going to be interesting. We're gonna have to wait and see how this goes forward. I think, she's being charged with wire fraud and basically saying that the company was worth a lot more than, Forbes had to change the amount of money and like downgrade her basically in her company. But what were they doing with all this money and all this blood that they were collecting from people at Walgreens, etc.? And I will just have to see how this book goes forward and this movie deal that was just resold again with Jennifer Lawrence, and see how they, I'm guessing it'll be similar to how they marketed the Facebook founder, CEO Mark Zuckerberg a few years ago. And, they'll turn this into a Hollywood story and wrap it up with a nice little bow.
Yeah, that's really one of the odd things about this is that again, I don't think there was anything remarkable about Elizabeth Holmes. I mean, she doesn't seem dumb, but she doesn't seem, especially like an expert in the medical field, and she didn't really try to get anybody else that could fill in that knowledge on board in the organization. She was getting all these bankers and politicians. I mean, she seems like she was just set up as, like you said, a next Mark Zuckerberg. I think she saw herself as kind of a Steve Jobs. It was 2003 when this company started, right? So he was constantly in the news, Steve Jobs at the time, and I think she kind of saw herself as something like that, but more of a celebrity kind of, again, at 19 with no real experience. I don't think she was a prodigy exactly in science, scientific prodigy. Again, I don't think she's dumb, but it seemed she seems like a candidate that was somebody that was young, somewhat charismatic, that might be picked up by the deep state to kind of play a front role in a front company. That there's nothing specifically like, oh, she's so genius, she's gonna take it. Was you know what I'm getting at, but yeah.
Yeah, I think we're gonna see, we have this convenient story of a Silicon Valley or Stanford College genius, and we find out later that these organizations, such as Facebook, etc., all created and fronted by, Alphabet and shadow government. And Chris and I are just speculating right now about what do they want with our blood.
Right. Yeah, that's to me that's bizarre just for him, and I wonder if you mentioned notice some of the Wikipedia pages are already changing. I wonder if some of these articles are going to go missing. But I want at the time, maybe that didn't, even at the time, that would have been a red flag for me. What I heard when you hear Ramesh Sunny Balwani saying that he got involved with the organization, because that'll really do some good work for machine learning and data processing. I mean, yeah, there's medical use for that, but that wouldn't be. It's the field that he was in. It raises a red flag to me. I mean, you can make excuses for him, I guess, but there's too much. There's just too much smoke in this story. Have you looked at any further into exactly what kind of partnership she had with the Clinton Global Initiative?
She was, there's a lot of photos of her with Chelsea Clinton, and there's videos of her speaking about her company on the
Okay.
Clinton Foundation and Clinton Global Initiative
Yeah.
website and their YouTube videos, and also she had been working with the Mexican investor Carlos Slim to provide blood testing to Mexicans.
He's
So
one of
it's a
Hillary's biggest
huge
donors. Right?
project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Carlos Slim's one of Hillary Clinton's biggest donors. They also mentioned that Bill Perry was the Secretary of Defense under Clinton. He was on the board for Theranos for that company. They made one interesting comment about Walgreens, the partnership they had with Walgreens, that I guess they had hired a lab consultant, and this was suspicious. Again, tying into this idea that all these huge companies, these investors that you would think would know what they're doing, they all fell under this spell and did absolutely no due diligence here. Walgreens, they said, did hire a lab consultant. This lab consultant traveled to some of these uh, buildings where Theranos was conducting these tests. He knew that something was up. He noticed that something was wrong. Apparently, the lab consultant that Walgreens had hired, he tried to alert them. This was in one of these Wall Street Journal reports. The lab consultant tried to tell Walgreens that something is wrong with these labs, and he could not get through to any of the actual investors, apparently. So I guess there was some sort of intermediary board for Walgreens or something that was basically, he said, obsessed with just getting the deal done. And I don't know if legally they had to hire a lab consultant to go through and finalize the deal, but they basically weren't interested in any of his findings. They said, no, just get the deal done, even though he said, there's something wrong with this lab, before they even made that deal at the time. So I mean, just so much smoke, and again, that ties into all of these investors. They can't be this naive. I'm making the same point here, but there's so many different names involved here, and it just seems like they're all being excused in the mainstream media. I wonder, is that why they're making a movie about it, to get some of these screenwriters in on writing up the perfect story on how to get these bigger names off the hook? Exactly.
Yep. And I guess the photos and the fundraising all between Chelsea Clinton and Elizabeth Holmes showed that Theranos has had fundraising in the past with the Clintons and with Hillary's 2016 campaign and with Chelsea Clinton.
So, yeah. And these people, I think they would have known that something was happening with this company. I wonder if Balwani and Holmes are going to be scapegoats. I'm not saying they're definitely not innocent, I don't think, in any of this, but I don't think they're the only guilty parties, and they're the ones that are being focused on. They're saying the charges right now. Again, just looking at this most recent report came out on June 14th. The actual legal documents. They are laying out some of the charges, saying Holmes, Theranos' founder, and Balwani, the former president and chief operating officer, are charged with 2 counts of conspiracy to commit wire fraud and 9 counts of wire fraud. If convicted, the pair, who were also linked romantically, face fines of $250,000 per count, plus restitution of over $100 million and decades in prison. Maximum statutory penalty for both conspiracy to commit wire fraud under 18 U.S. the section, and for wire fraud itself, it's 20 years per count, and each count could be served consecutively. They could be served consecutively, the counts, so she could be facing decades, many decades in prison. Both of them, Balwani and Holmes, I think they're kind of being scapegoats here. We'll see. I also wonder if that's a way of the feds to make some kind of behind the scenes deal. Maybe they will get a much lesser sentence, but they are publicly threatening them, similar to, I think, what might have happened with Anthony Weiner, where they were first threatening him with a 15-year sentence. I think they made some kind of, behind the scenes deal in that case personally, and then he ended up getting 2 years. I wonder if something similar happens with Theranos, just seeing how they're laying out these charges right now. Those
I
are the main.
think,
Yeah.
also,
Ahead,
I
yeah.
think, depending on when the film comes out too, and if Jennifer Lawrence does a good job playing her, she could face less time.
Well, yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. That could be. Yeah. You wonder if that's are they building? Are they trying to humanize her? And I
Yes.
don't know. I'm so yeah. You become so cynical after you see this sort of thing happen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and just keep same things keep happening. That's basically what I wanted to look at regarding this whole case. Well,
Yeah, thanks. Very fascinating.
yeah, we'll definitely follow up. Holly, thanks for joining. Holly Seeliger has a great channel. It is I did name it right. Zoon Politikon. Is that Zoon Politikon? Like,
Right. Yep. Thank
okay,
you.
got a tongue twister when I try to name that one, but that's it. Right here, you can search for it. I have a link in the description of my video as well. I also have a link to my Patreon account. Thank you everybody that has donated over there. A few dollars makes a huge difference, allows me to keep talking about these issues. And I have a link to the one article that we looked at that includes the actual 14-page legal document. That basically has the most recent summary of everything in this case. We will get more information one way or another. This is an ongoing case, so I hope Holly maybe can join again for a follow-up soon. Thanks again, Holly.
Thanks a
Thank you.
lot.
And thanks for watching. I will